Okay, good morning. And today I'm gonna be giving the brief introduction of what I'm gonna be teaching. And I'd like you to get familiar with the concept of solar to X or power to X. Meaning, the meaning is quite vague and large because it's about energy conversion from one form to another. And the big umbrella for solar to X is power to X. So it can be solar, it can be electricity, it can be anything, and it converted into X can be the X factor can be different things like what Professor Paravi has taught, the electricity or heat or batteries or materials. Yeah, so basically it's largely explaining the concept of converting solar energy into something. And the X factors, so let's start the class by start to think about what could be the X factor. So yeah, let's hear from everyone. What do you think could be the X factor for this? What can solar make? เอาง่ายๆกัน Electricity, okay, that's good. Heat,
เอ่ออะไรเนี่ย chemical energy
yeah, solar to chemical energies. What else? Steam is also heat. Yeah, basically it's about what you have said. Three things has covered most of the solar conversion. But if you look a little bit further, it can be solar to food, like photosynthesis. And it's also converting solar and water into starch, sugar. Yeah, that could be one of the things. Okay, so this is the outline of my course, my part. So I will divide the X factor into mostly three things, and then explaining the hybrid. So what you have just said. So one is solar to fuels. So as chemical engineer, we like to think how we can make the renewable fuels from solar energy. And the next one will be the case study and also techno-economics analysis of the solar to fuels, how far away from us achieving the commercial solar utilization for chemical energy. And then the fourth class would be solar to green chemicals. And that's also important the way we move forward. Instead of using the fossil fuels to create chemicals, we try to use solar energy to create green chemicals to be used for pharmaceutical or different industry. And also talk about the solar thermal management and case study. As you might have heard, the heat is not really good for solar conversion. It's reduce the efficiencies. So how we can manage the heat. And then 6 and 7, I will talk about hybrid technologies, combining 2 or 3 technologies to achieve the full spectrum of solar utilization and to tackle different problems. And the last one would be the group project presentation. So give a task on the third class, and then on the last class we have some kind of presentation together. That's what I will cover. And the course material refer to my own papers. So the first one just published, this is about the techno-economics analysis of the solar to fuels, which one is closer to industry adoption and what are the directions. So this is, if you have time, this is one of the paper you should read. And then the second one is from 2022. So this is it's more like solar fuels. So different strategy to improve the efficiencies of the solar utilization. So that's the two papers. And a bit about myself. So I did only half a year in July. I went to material science and then I moved to Japan, moved to Sendai. So I spent a term in July, but I was in Sati July before. So July is like my home, second home. And then I moved to Sendai, which is the center of the earthquake in 2021, 2011. And yeah, and then 2018, I moved to Cambridge. That's also when the Brexit happened. So it's quite fun to be in the center of all the excitement that is ongoing. Okay, so let's discuss a little bit about the problem with solar energy. And what I mean by energy is mainly the electricity. So what's the problem, right? So one thing is the intimacy and reliability. You wouldn't want to connect your computer with the solar panel because it would go on and off and it would ruin your computer. Same thing, if you want to have electrolyzers making hydrogen, you wouldn't want to connect directly with the solar panel because your hydrogen production would be on and off and the catalyst would be destroyed. So that's one of the main problem. Another thing for the electricity is the storage. If you, I'm not sure if you have seen, well, the closest one is Tesla car, for example, the electric car, the EV. You need large and very heavy batteries to store just a bit of energy. And if you imagine if you want to store that solar power to be used for industry or to be used for the whole city is gonna require large amount of lithium batteries, and lithium battery is known for catching fire and and what do you call the heat become a problem, especially in Thailand. That's why we don't see much of the large scale battery energy storage in Thailand because we have a very high heat and it you require also cooling to make your battery storage safe. And another problem is land use and space requirements. So if you plot the amount of land used for that is required to make reliable electricity, solar energy is in Thailand is enough, but the country like Vietnam, where they don't have a lot of flat land, this become a problem, or UK or Europe, where they have very limited space. If you want to put solar energy, solar panels everywhere, then there would be no space for food, no space for agriculture. I mean, food is agriculture. No space for um, what do you call food? Residential. That would because that's linked to the fifth point that it cannot be transported far. So let's say you have Abu Dhabi, no, let's say it's you build the solar panels in the desert and you want to transport 1,000 kilometers to the city. That's impossible, and that's very lossful and wasteful, right? So we always want to keep the solar panel closer to the city, and that's also taking away the space for us, right? And the conversion efficiency is still a main problem, but we are getting there with the efficiency that we need. And right now, the solar panel can go up to like 40 something percent of the whole spectrum. That is very impressive. So that the efficiency mean we can make the solar panel a little bit smaller. And if you see from Professor Paravi, the slide on concentrated solar, for example, so you can make solar cell this size, and then you concentrate the light into this small area. So that would make things cheaper, right? So but I think what she showed was solar thermal, but in this case, instead of making the receiver as a thermal receiver, you can put the solar cell there and and receive all those energy and convert it So that could be one way to to tackle the space problem. Another one, number five, is a grid integration and infrastructure. You need very different infrastructure than current condition because you go from something that is very reliable and constant towards something that is unreliable and not so consistent. So you need to develop, different grid structure. Instead of centralized grid, you might, if you want to go renewable, you might need to develop like a microgrid or something like that. So that's also a problem. And of course, the initial investment is one of the things, and the degradation and lifespan. And this is one of very important issue that not many people talk about is solar panel has a lifespan of 30 years. That's what the papers say. But in reality is in Thailand, for example, if you talk about the heat and everything, and heat and humidity degrade the solar panel faster. So in Thailand, we're talking about 25, 20 years, right? And all those stack structures of the solar panel basically is very hard to recycle. So many researchers now trying to develop from the ground up, what do you have, Chen, from the ground up to make sure that the solar panel is easily recyclable. So that's what I could think of in terms of the limitation. So 7 point here. If you have anything to add, yeah, please feel free. So that's the solar electricity. And let's go to this chart. So this one I asked ChatGPT to help me plot the the 100 solar plant in the world and against the distance to the city, the nearest city that power will be used for. And as you can see here, it doesn't located far because, as I mentioned, the energy transmission is really lossy in the longer distance. And as you can see here, most of the solar projects, the big solar project located within 5 kilometers only, and only few located like almost 80, 70 kilometers. And this is one of the main problem in China because when they built the solar panel in the middle of the desert, they didn't think about the transmission and they were expecting people to move near the desert. But at the end, they built a city, but nobody moved there, meaning that right now in China, in some city, more than 40% of the electricity produced from those solar project is being wasted because they cannot store that much energy. So that's what one of the problem. And another thing I would like to show this one is this is the problem and also opportunities. So as you can see here, because of the unreliability of the solar energy, um, and that's very harmful to the grid structure. You can see here that most of the country, we keep the renewable solar power or renewable wind power to about 20% because we don't know when it's going to come and when it's going to be gone. So that's the baseline. But in some country, there are special case like for Sweden, they have both solar and wind provide more consistent supply. So they're more brave to go up a little higher. Or Brazil, for example, Brazil is very unique because they have a lot of hydropower, and that is 24/7. So they could go up to almost 100%. And why I say this is important is because, for example, if you are from iPhone 15, if you look at the keynote, um, the CEO, who is that? CEO of Apple. CEO of Apple, what's the name? Tim Cook, right? Tim Cook said iPhone 15 has the net zero carbon emission, has a zero carbon emission. The way he achieved that is, of course, by reducing the use of virgin materials. Instead of using virgin material, he used recycled material. Um, instead of producing, instead of um, yeah using multiple process, he tried to trim down the process and make it more efficient. And one of the main important factor to achieve the net zero is he built he used renewable electricity because electricity has carbon footprint, right? So if you use renewable electricity, it basically count as zero carbon footprint. So you can start to imagine if you want to build an iPhone or iPad or MacBook Air factories in some country, where would he go? Would want to go to the country where of course the labor is cheap, but also provide the renewable electricity. So then the iPhone carbon footprint is less. And if you think about this chart, right? Thailand is about here. But for example, if and Vietnam is also about here. So if we can go up to maybe 40%, just 40%, how much investment we can attract from all those big companies. So that's why energy storage is important, and how and not just utilization of solar energy, but convert it and put it in the batteries or chemical fuels is very important. So how can we this is just an introduction, so I'm going to be speaking in a mostly broad sense. So how can we convert solar energy into fuels, right? This is what we have our world has done over the past million years, millennia. Um, and we know is our fuels, fossil fuels that we use now, they are the result of, the biomass from long time ago, compact at the high heat, high temperature, high pressure, and then make fossil fuels. And that's what it is. Essentially, we want to mimic this, but in a much shorter time. So we want to create some kind of fuels. And before we go into that, I would like to point this chart. So I have to give credit to my previous supervisor, Professor Erwin Reisner, for making this very interesting chart. You can see that as a chemical engineer on the left side, I call it the fossil age chemical engineer. We break down the big molecules into smaller one and then use it for different applications, right? So we have fossil fuel dig down from the ground. It has a long chain carbon, and then we refine it, and then we separate it, and then we get different kind of starting material, and then we maybe make polymers, make different things and use for different things. And from each step, each process, it releases carbon dioxide, right? Because you burn it, you do something with it. And when we use it towards the end, at the end of the life cycle, we just put it in a landfill, and that again digest and convert it into different carbon gases like greenhouse gas emission, right? So that's the current chemical engineer. So what we do, we try to make each line more efficient, reduce less carbon dioxide. And of course, we're now looking to recycle those back, right? Recycle those material, maybe back to the chemical stage, maybe back to here and then go back again, back to here and then go back again. So not put it in the landfill. So that's very important job for chemical engineers. But I would say that if we want to move toward net zero, we have to find a new resources, right? So instead of fossil fuels, can we use renewable fuels instead, right? Renewable fuels, we will talk about it, how we can make it from sunlight. And renewable fuel generally has a really different characteristic, right? The fossil fuel is a long chain. Renewable fuels, because we make from carbon dioxide or biomass, it normally has a shorter chain, so we have to make it longer. So that's a different problem to tackle for chemical engineers to be able to achieve or to sustain human society, right? And the sustainable chemical engineer would also think or design the process that can reutilize or recycle those materials and make it non-linear, right? Instead of linear economy where everything finish, come back again and reuse it so that we make the least impact to the environment. So this is the picture that I made for the paper. The easiest way to understand this is artificial photosynthesis. This is what we want to talk about, right? Solar to fuels, mimicking the photosynthesis where you have water, solar energy, carbon dioxide. You do photosynthesis through photosystem one, photosystem two, and then you make starch or sugar. This is exactly the same thing. So you have the very this is what we want to achieve, right? You have the very inert carbon dioxide, you want to activate it by sunlight and it become energetic. It go through the artificial photosynthesis, right? It take up more sunlight, some water, and then it becomes strong, like energy dense fuels. And then, so this can be methane, methanol, ethanol, um, other those small molecules. And then we utilize them to drive different work. And then after its lifetime, it become weak and then dead, and then it go back to the cycle. So this is what we're trying to achieve with the artificial photosynthesis, using all solar energy to run all this. Okay, so far, any questions? Did you know that Apple almost signed a contract 4 years ago to make MacBook Air factory in Thailand. But at the end, they didn't. They decided to go to Vietnam. So that's very unfortunate because Vietnam has more renewable energy, um, and better incentive from the government. So yeah, that's why I say that what we are talking about today has an impact also on our country. If we can maybe provide better energy storage, through solar fuels, for example, that could very help the country. So how the solar fuels or synthetic fuels or renewable fuels is created. So this is one of the very important concept that people often look overlooked. So you can see here, when you talk about renewable energy, we always talk about electricity, right? Electricity can be used directly. But if you want to create renewable fuels, you need one more. You need one more component, and that is the renewable resource. What I mean by renewable resource, you can see from this, in this case, renewable resource is CO2, right? Renewable resource can be water. So if you want to make hydrogen, you split water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. So that's our resource. Renewable resource can be biomass. In Thailand, we have a lot of biomass. If we have biomass, you can convert it into chemicals as well. Right. So that's the component, that's the basic concept that I would like everybody to understand, that if you want to make something, you need the resource, right? It's not just it's not like using electricity directly into our iPhone, for example. So I give two examples here. One is the example of water splitting. So you can have solar energy to split water molecules. So water molecule is very stable, but if you activate it with catalyst or with sunlight, it can be split into hydrogen and oxygen. And that hydrogen can can be stored underground or in some tank, and then for long term. And when the energy is needed, when the electricity is needed, it can then be combined with oxygen through fuel cells and give you the electricity. Of course, the round trip efficiency is about 40%, not as high as batteries, but we're talking about long-term storage. Batteries, if you go to North Pole, South Pole, it will die immediately, right? Because battery cannot survive in the very cold temperature. But let's say for if you have hydrogen storage, you can put this, in during the summer time of the, let's say, North Pole, right? You can make as much hydrogen as possible, keep it, and then it for long-term storage. And then in the winter, you can use those hydrogen. So that's one of the benefit of the hydrogen. And another one is hydrogen can be used directly in many chemical process. As you know, many chemical conversion require hydrogen as a reducing agent. And for example, if you want to mine the ore and to make iron, for example, normally you need fossil fuels to act as a reducing agent, but instead you can also use hydrogen, and that would reduce the carbon dioxide emission. Another example of the reaction is CO2 conversion, and this is artificial photosynthesis that mimic the plant. So basically, we have CO2, we have water, we add the energy into it. The CO2 is activated and form the new is this the bonding is dissociated and form the new bond with water and other molecules to make synthetic fuels, and also make hydrogen and oxygen in return. So that's what we want to achieve with solar fuels. And yeah, again, let's revisit this. This is the current image of the solar energy utilization. When we talk about solar energy right now, we talk about electricity. At most, we store it in batteries, in car batteries, large battery, and then we use. But yeah, that come with the two main problem. One is the lack of storage solutions, and another one is the distance to the end user, as I mentioned before. Okay. Why, why, why we want to convert solar energy into chemical fuels? And I think this picture explained very well, right? So if you look at the global power demand, look here, 20 terawatt. That's what we need in 1 year to support our modern society. Right now, 2024, we out of that electricity is only 20%, right? 4 terawatt. But the rest we need it in the form of fuels, right? The liquid fuels. And that's for SEG chemical, that's for many chemical industry where you don't need electricity, you need resource, you need fuels to run your reaction. So let's say if you want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, one thing we can do is we can increase the electricity. So this by converting the traditional process that require fossil fuel, we can replace with using electricity, and that process is called electrification. Right? We want to electrify as much process as possible to be able to use um to be able to power by electricity instead of liquid fuels. And we see this example really clearly in the transport industry, right? We want to move away from liquid petroleum to batteries. So but I would argue that in 2030, 2050, this portion at most would be like 40%, 30%. But the rest of the energy we still need in the form of fuels. So that's why, and this fuels normally right now is fossil fuels. So we want to replace that with the renewable fuels like hydrogen, like ammonia, or other molecules. Okay, so far, any questions or anything you'd like to discuss? No questions at all? I'm explaining very well. มีอะไรสงสัยไหมฮะคอมเมนต์ No? ได้ป่ะอะไรนะบอกว่า
อนาคต
อนาคต what I'm saying is that the way we want to achieve decarbonization is to reduce the use of fossil fuels, right? Let's imagine this is a fossil fuels. Right now, electricity is renewable. Let's say the whole thing is renewable. So we want to increase the electricity and decrease the use of fossil fuels, right? In 2050, we want to do this. But I would argue that electricity utilization is only limited to certain process. You cannot use electricity for everything, right? Sometimes you need very, very high heat. Sometimes you need your fossil fuel as reducing agent to participate in the chemical process. Not so if you need your fossil fuel as a reagent, you can't just replace that with the electricity. So that's why I'm saying that, let's say in the 50 years into the future, this portion will increase, of course. Right now, it already increasing with the replacement of the internal combustion engine car with the electric car. So this would go up, and many process like cooling, heating, we already electrify all those process. And soon enough, we will electrify many, many more process. So the demand for electricity will increase and the fossil fuel will decrease, but still, we still need for the fuels in the form of liquid chemical. So we have to find a way to replace this fossil fuels with renewable fuels. So that's what I want to say. And if we go back here for those who didn't make it in time, this is very important concept to understand, right? On the left is what we've been doing. We break down the big molecules into smaller molecules. And along the way, we emit carbon dioxide. And at the end of the life cycle, we make product, of course, to sustain our society. But at the end, we put it in a landfill, it releases more greenhouse gases. But I would say that moving forward to the future, we have to find the replacement for fossil fuels. And this is the renewable fuels that I'm talking about. But it comes with a new challenge as well, because renewable fuel is normally is a smaller molecules, right? So if you want to make same product, if you want to make polymer, you have to connect your and breaking down the bond release energy. But if you want to connect, it requires more energy and more energy. That's why um, this is a new way of thinking of how we can gonna be achieving our net zero by, you know, developing new process, new chemical engineering process. And that's what I'm trying to encourage a young generation to start to think about, right? Not just to make this existing process more efficient, but maybe find alternative process and think about the economics of it, how we can make it economical and be able to utilize in the industrial level. And that's what we're gonna talk in our third class. Okay. This is one of the main issue about Thailand that I would like everybody to start to think about. I I just learned that we are the net exporter of the food. We are the number seven or number six net exporter of food product in the world. But as you know, food plant need fertilizers, need NPK, right? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. But even though we are number six net exporter of the food product, we don't have our own ammonia, nitrogen fixation facilities. We buy ammonia from China, Russia, I don't know what else country, but yeah, mostly we import the nitrogen. So if you want to talk, if we say we want to be the what do you call the powerhouse, the เขาเรียกว่าอะไรอ่ะเป็นครัว we want to be the kitchen of the world this is one of the main factor that we have to start to think about. This is all about the national security as well. If one day Russia decided not to send the ammonia to us, what kind of replacement can we develop our own ammonia facility in Thailand? And this Haber-Bosch process, have you learned about it? Have you heard? Haber-Bosch process is the very simple process, and it was invented like 1909, long, long time ago, and it's basically combining nitrogen. Nitrogen is 80% in the air, right? Nitrogen. Combining, but it's very stable, so it's very hard to activate the nitrogen and form the new bond. So the Haber-Bosch process, they combine nitrogen with hydrogen under high temperature and high pressure and make ammonia. And this process is really um, the only way, almost the only way to fix nitrogen from the very stable form into the ammonia form that we can use and convert it into urea or some other thing as the fertilizers. And if you look at our body, the nitrogen atom in our body, like all those protein has a nitrogen atom, right? 70% of the nitrogen atom in our body came from this process, 47%. So it's very important process, right? But making this ammonia, basically, if you can see here, the process of making ammonia itself, um, hmm, I actually forgot, but the ammonia itself, nitrogen plus hydrogen doesn't produce carbon dioxide, but the whole process actually need fossil fuels like methane to act as a reducing agent or something. And that in turn you get. Oh, sorry. So they make, so basically you need hydrogen. So hydrogen came from the fossil fuels, right? You add you add something like methane into it. You apply heat and temperature, the methane break down into to provide the hydrogen, and then the hydrogen react with the nitrogen to form ammonia, and at the end you get carbon dioxide. And this whole process is account for 1.8% of the carbon dioxide emission currently. And this is huge amount, right? So if we say we look at this process and we want to decarbonize it, what can we do? Right? So you have coal in the normal process, you need coal plus nitrogen, right, to make producing internal hydrogen, and hydrogen react with the nitrogen through Haber-Bosch, and then you get ammonia plus CO2, and that's called gray or blue ammonia. If we release carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, we call it gray. If we have the CCS carbon capture and storage, then we call it blue ammonia, right? And the ammonia is being utilized and then release nitrogen back into the atmosphere. That's the ammonia cycle. But if you want to replace this with solar energy utilization or artificial photosynthesis, right? We can maybe just simply do the water splitting, right? As I mentioned before, we can do water splitting, making hydrogen, and then at the beginning of the process, and that hydrogen combined with the nitrogen, and then we can of course use the same exact process, heat and pressure, because this can be done using renewable electricity, right? Applying heat, applying pressure doesn't require fossil fuels, right? So this process, the first step to make hydrogen, and then hydrogen combined with nitrogen, using and then in going into the Haber-Bosch process, we don't alter the main process, but then we get the green ammonia because it has no carbon emission, right? So that could be one way. So this is the example. Okay. Before we move forward, I would like to point out one of the main issue with when we want to tackle one problem, there are always another problem, right? If you want to tackle energy problem, as I mentioned, you say solar panels, it will be related to food security as well because you taking away the space for the agriculture. If you want to solve the water problem, again, is it you need if you want to solve energy problem, you also relate to the water problem because you can see if you want to make biofuels like น้ำมัน palm, for example, you need for the whole lifetime of that palm trees to make 1 liter of biofuels, you need 2,500 liters of fresh water, right? And as you know, fresh water is not, it seems like a lot, but it's only account for 2-3% of the global, water, mostly as sea water, right? So if you need fresh water, it to make if you need a lot of fresh water to make renewable fuels, like what I said, making hydrogen, making, renewable fuels, it will also affect the water security of our society. And of course, these are all interconnected into the smaller cycle. You can see there are like the issue of land resource, energy resource, and also water resource. This is all connected. And this is called WiFi nexus. Water, energy, food, and environment nexus. Nexus mean, yeah, it's all interconnected. And 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 when we, as a chemical engineer, you might want to tackle the energy security, but I would encourage you to look at other problems as well when you create new solutions. So in the group project that I will assign, yeah, you need to, account this into the thinking, to make our process sustainable. Okay, let me talk a little bit about my work before we go into. Uh, I'm very interested in solar utilization into fuels, and I'm looking at all these different systems. Can be solar to electricity, like Professor Paravi has talked about, like solar to batteries and storage, solar to chemical. This is my specialty. Um, Solar to thermal and all this integration. So this is the example of, if you look at solar energy, right? You have the high energy photons. Basically, you want to convert photon into something, right? So you have to look at the energy of the photon. You have high energy photon that can drive very thermodynamically challenging reactions, but you have also lower energy photon that can not drive very high energy required reaction, and you have a really low energy photon, like mostly heat in the IR region that doesn't do anything in the chemical scheme of things. So you have to look at this whole spectrum, and you see that when you talk about solar panel with 40% efficiencies, meaning that take it utilized almost half of this photon, right? From this to his, and then the rest, it just go through the panel. It doesn't get utilized, and that photon is just a low energy photon that just go through and accumulate it and become heat, for example. But there is also other kind of process that utilize. So the higher energy photon you can use it to make chemical fuels, for example. But the lower energy photon, maybe you can use that as a heat, right? You can concentrate the heat into the receiver and then use that heat to break down, for example, in this scheme, water molecule. If you put 2000 degree, it will dissociate into hydrogen and oxygen. So that could be one way to utilize those heat. Another thing, I'm not sure whether you have heard thermoelectrics. Those could be one way. Thermoelectric works. when the temperature of the two sides of the device, hot and cold, has a different temperature, and it creates the one directional current flow. So if you, for example, in this scheme, if you have this kind of device and on the back is cold and on the top is black, absorbing all the light and make it very hot, you can generate electricity also from the heat of the solar light. And this is totally different mechanism than solar panel that Professor Paravi talked about. And this kind of device has an efficiency of about 1%. So even if the best one, 2%, that's their conversion efficiencies. But if you talk about waste heat that normally you don't utilize anyway, that can also help, to create more electricity. Another thing, this is very easy to imagine, right? When I talk about water energy nexus, and we need fresh water to do different things. And normally, the way we achieve fresh water is to reverse osmosis, right? And that of course take up a lot of energy, a lot of pressure to push the seawater through all those membrane and separate the salts away. And this is another example of the simple way to desalinate the water. You have the floating platform, and then you make the top surface black, absorbing light. And then when the light hit the IR portion, the visible light just heat up that top portion and then vaporize the water. And then you make a dome on top. You collect that condensed water like น้ำกลั่นนะลงมา and then you get the pure, the desalinated water. So that's also one way to utilize the heat. And through my lectures, the next 6 time I will talk about, all this, but this today is just the introduction. And this is my work back in Cambridge. So the first work that I like to show you is the device that can work 24/7. So normally when we talk about the land usage, right? If you put the solar panel in the UK, for example, the time that solar panel receive the sunlight is only 5-6 hours a day and can be less in winter, maybe 4 hours. So all those other time at night, the panel is just useless, and then it take up the space also for, it doesn't you don't put it there and then you remove it at night, it take up the space 24/7. So in this work, we make the panels to do water splitting, but then the same principle, we try to modify that panel also into electrolyzers. So that panel that is solar driven, making hydrogen, at night you can connect it with the renewable electricity from wind or from hydropower, and to make hydrogen constantly throughout 24 hours, meaning that the same space can be utilized, the same facilities, the gas collection facilities, the separation facilities can be run continuously, and we don't waste the space. So that's first way how I try to tackle the space problem. Another one, of course, I will go into more detail, but just want to give you an introduction. Another one is the water splitting device that is connected with thermoelectrics on the back. Traditionally, if you have solar panel like this, and then you have thermoelectric on the back, the thing is, you what you want to achieve in ideal case is you want the solar panel to utilize 40% of the higher energy spectrum, and then the heat that is accumulated in solar panel, you want to use thermoelectrics and then feed the electricity back to the panel to give more output, right? But in reality, the problem is if you put thermoelectrics on the back like this, the thermoelectric heats up a lot, and then the panel also heats up a lot, and that heat reduces the efficiency of the solar conversion, and that many people, this idea become obsolete. I think people were doing this like 10-20 years ago, and then they found out that, oh, it doesn't work. because the panel, instead of, let's say, 20% conversion efficiency, reduced to 16%. It's not worth it to do. And then you have to put thermoelectric material, which is also expensive, on the back. So people gave up on that idea. But in the case of this, because we want, instead of doing electricity, we do chemical reaction, we need electrolyte in the front. So here I designed the device that has the front part that has the electrolytes flowing, so that we can control the temperature. And that front part is the heat, the hot part, and then the back part is the cold part. So I connect the back part with the water jacket, and meaning that we try to keep the front part hot and then the back part cold. But in this kind of device, you don't get the same effect as the solar cell that I just mentioned, because you have electrolytes to help cool down. So this is the form of thermal management that you can do. And we found, higher efficiencies, almost like by 1.6 times or something like that, by doing so, in comparison to doing the same thing with the solar panels. So that's very good. And we also demonstrated that the heat that we accumulate can help with the reaction. As you know, kinetics of different reaction will go faster in the heat. So here we show that we want to convert carbon dioxide to formate, and we show that when you heat up the cells, the formate formation become faster as well. So that's the another work. And then the last work during my PhD, I I want to make hydrogen from seawater, right? So I think, what are the best way, the easiest way to do that? Because normally, if you want to make seawater, if you want to use seawater, it's just like our body. Our body cannot drink seawater because of the iron and everything. Making hydrogen from seawater using catalyst also cannot, you know, be fed directly by seawater because of all the iron and everything. It's just gonna poison your catalyst and it's just gonna die. So basically, what we did here is very simple. I will and we just float these materials, like floating material, the one I just showed you before, and then vaporize using the IR heat to vaporize the water first, and then we put the catalyst on top. So the catalyst doesn't touch the seawater directly. So we have the water vapor pass through the catalyst like this. So the catalyst, instead of splitting seawater, it split the gas phase water. And this demonstration show that we can, through this kind of integration, we can get not only hydrogen but also clean water at the same time. So solving two problems in one device. Yeah, we also made some kind of floating device also to float around Cambridge. But yeah, I will go into that later. And we also talk about scaling up, making, I will explain about this device in the next class, but I want to show you that what I will cover is, how we can design the device and how can we um scale up our device to be used. Okay. So for this class, because today I have to leave a bit early, so I will just leave you with the basic understanding of solar fuel synthesis route. So this is the main route that I would like you to understand in today's lecture. So there are three main ways to make the chemical energy out of solar energy. One is to use photocatalyst. Photocatalyst is a semiconductor with a band gap. And once you excite it, it's very exact same principle as the solar cells. But solar cell, you take away the electron and make current. But here we excite our band gap, and then the electrons is used for reduction reaction, and then the hole is used for oxidation reaction. So instead of having different layers to take away the electron and make current, we interface directly with our resource, like water or carbon dioxide, and we do the conversion. So on the conduction band, you do the reduction, right? It can be photon reduced to hydrogen or proton reduced to hydrogen or carbon dioxide reduced to different kind of carbon form, like carbon monoxide or methanol, methane. And on the oxidation side, you can have water being oxidized into oxygen to complete the cycle. And this is very important to know that if you want to achieve only this, you also need the other part to occur. Otherwise, the redox cycle will not be closed. And basically, you cannot just get one reaction. So on the oxidation side, there should be something all the time, right? So that's a challenge actually, because as you see here, you have water, you oxidize water into oxygen, and oxygen is basically priceless. You don't really need oxygen. So you spend a lot of energy to make oxygen, and at the end, you only use hydrogen on the other side. So that's the first concept. The second concept is the reason for this is the first concept is of particles. So the particle can float in the water like this, and then you shine the light. In industry, it doesn't really work very well because it's not really scalable, and it you at the end of it is all nanoparticles, right? So it's really hard for to separate and everything. So we want to go toward the second approach where you put the catalyst on top of the substrate, you know, and separate the and this one you get two products in one compartment, right? But if you make the sandwich style like the second one, you have the one side producing the reduction product and the other side producing the oxidation product. So you put that particles into the film, the conductive glass substrate or conductive substrate. You electronically, ohmically contact the two, they call it photoanode and photocathode, right, together. And then, yeah, now you can have the device that one side produce hydrogen, one side produce oxygen, and you can do the separation of the product. And this device can be taken out from the solution very easily. So that's what we call photoelectrochemical cells, or PEC, right? PEC, PEC. Okay, so we have photocatalyst. Let's name it PC, photocatalyst, PC. Photoelectrochemical cells, PEC. And then we have the last system that is the closest to the industry is the PV plus EC. So you have PV providing electron, and then you have like electrolyzers, electrochemical process. So that's the first two is the direct route to make fuels from solar energy, and the last one is the indirect route. So you make electricity first from solar panel, and then you power your electrolyzers to do the same chemical reaction. The efficiency, if you can note, the first one, the world record right now is 1.1 solar to hydrogen, 1.1 efficiencies. The number B is about, I think, 13% solar to hydrogen. And then, so solar to hydrogen is STH. I will talk about it in the next class. And then the last one, the world record is about 31 or something percent, right? So these are the different stage of the development of all these systems. Okay. This one I won't go through today, but this is basically to show that if you want to do water splitting, you need to look at the band alignment. So that's one of the challenging part. I will talk about it in the next class, but today I just give you the brief idea. So the band gap of your semiconductor has to be above and below the reduction of the energy, the potential of making hydrogen. You need a little bit more energy to drive this reaction. And then the conduction, the valence band has to be a little bit more positive than the potential of water oxidation. In this way, you can complete the full reaction. If this particle shift a little bit up or down, it doesn't work anymore, right? So that's why it's quite challenging, and the band gap has to be larger than this 1.23 electron volt to be able to drive, right? In reality, as I mentioned, the world record of 1.1%, you have a very large band gap. Instead of 1.23 electron volt, you have like 3.1 electron volt. But yeah, so that you can see how challenging it is. If you have the photocatalyst with the 1.23, it normally do nothing because normally you need a little bit more energy to drive. And another way we can add more energy into more to tackle this problem is to form this kind of scheme. It's called C scheme. So you have, instead of having one light absorber, you have two connect, and one side can be more positive and one side can be more negative, and the two particle connect, right? So that's the way we can overcome this limitation also. I will go into it next week. This is the utilization of the solar energy. You can see here that this is the energy of the solar spectrum, right? It has about 5% in the UV region, and then the rest, about 50% in the visible region, and then whatever left over, 45% is in the IR region. And as you can see here, most of the solar to chemical conversion happening using the light about 50% of the spectrum. And we can never go too far because, as I mentioned, it's about the band gap, right? You cannot go very low band gap. It doesn't work. So that's heat portion of the solar energy will always be wasted if we don't do anything about it. Right? We can only utilize as much because of the thermodynamic requirements. And this concept, I'm not sure whether Professor Paravi has talked about, but it's another concept I would like to discuss, to talk with you today, and I think it's the last concept. Um, so if you have the semiconductor like this and the band gap, if you have the photon energy that is lower than the band gap, it will go through. It will not be absorbed, right? It will go through, and this is called absorption loss, right? It doesn't absorb. But if you have the energy, photon energy that is larger, people don't talk about this much, but if you excite too much into the conduction band, the electron that got excited needs to relax down to the conduction band before it can go through different reaction, right? And this relaxation is called thermalized loss. Has Professor Paravi talked about this, right? Thermalized loss, and this accumulated and become heat, and this also accumulated and become heat. So you get heat from two phenomena. So that's why I think heat or thermal management is very important. This one I will go through next week. Okay, as I mentioned in this lecture, we also cover the scaling potential of all these different systems. And we will also discuss about the techno-economics of. So this, if you see here, this is currently the main product we get from carbon dioxide conversion to fuels, right? You get hydrogen, carbon monoxide, um, and other things, formic acid, acetic acid, methanol, ethanol. So this is a analysis. So please, if you have time, go read my recent paper here, and try to understand this, because we will use this to discuss towards next class. Yeah, and also talk about the future outlook, how we can scale our system, how we maybe reduce the land use competition with utilizing the floating design, go into the large area that is available in the sea, for example. Yeah, we also talk about different deployment and other things, and that's is coming up. So last thing I would like to talk here is, as I mentioned, the heat is always a problem in any energy conversion using solar light. This is one of the project that my master student is doing. So if you have heard, normally the solar panels efficiency that you buy right now is 20%, right? And that's measured at 25 degrees. And that's measured in China or in the UK, standardized. 25%, lifetime 30 years. In reality, if you run these panels in Thailand, the efficiency you get is about 16%. 16, 4% loss because of the heat. Because the panel in Thailand, um, every 1 degree temperature increase in from that standard condition, the efficiency reduced by 0.4%. So that's the thermal coefficients. So I'm a little bit concerned that for Thai people, for Thai industry, we just take what other country make, and then we just implement it without adapting toward our Thai climate or environment. So from this fact that the efficiency reduced by 4%, this is a lot over a long period of time. There's a lot of electricity being lost. And also the lifetime of the panels, instead of 30 years, maybe it now lasts for 20 years, 25 years, and that create a lot of waste. And that's why different professor in material science, they're trying to find a way to recycle those solar panels out after its lifetime because it contain different metal and so on. So it's kind of hard to recycle. So in this project, the basic concept is to take away the heat from the back of the solar panels, using a really scalable method, coating the conductive paste, thermal conductive paste on the back of the solar panel. If you go see the solar panel on the back, it's actually polymer sheet. It's really interesting. Why don't they use more thermal conductive sheet, but they use polymer sheet? So what we did here is just simple. Just put the thermal conductive paste on the back. And by doing so, we can reduce the solar panel by like 2 or 3 degrees. Yeah, so in over 30 years, that's a lot of electricity we can save. So that's one of the way we try to tackle this thermal issue. Okay, so I guess I need to go today. So I would like to leave you with this chart. So please, maybe what I want you to do in as a homework is to look into to look more into this concept, right? To try to understand more, because we will talk in depth next week. And then, yeah, try to understand this a little more and try to see where you are in this chain as a chemical engineer in the future, process engineer in the future. And and these are the two papers I would like you to read if you have time. I think you can, the first one is open access, so you can access it anywhere. But the second one, I think you have to access through July email to download. If you cannot access, just let me know and I will download and send it to you. Okay? Any questions before we go?